It's being called the greatest thing in transportation since the container ship. They call it the double stack. It's a container railroad car, and the experts say its impact on Seattle is already being felt with incredible potential for the future. As Glenn Farley reports tonight, Northwest exports may be getting a big boost from double stack.
This is a double stack container train headed to Chicago with imports. Trade experts say stacking containers too high is highly efficient, and now goods can go faster to New York by land than by sea. This is Burlington Northern Train number 3, westbound from Chicago to Seattle. But it looks a lot different than the trains going to Chicago. This train appears virtually empty. Containers are stacked only one high. It's a picture of the trade deficit at work. But unused capacity means great deals for shippers.
No question about it. Almost anybody can make a deal on a container now, eastbound or westbound.
So it sounds from your perspective, this isn't a bad situation.
The shippers never had it so good.
Just how far will the railroads go?
We've been pricing it on the basis of what does it take to make it move.
According to Watson, low rates combined with the efficiency of the double-stack railroad car will mean more and more exports through Seattle and Tacoma, despite the trade deficit.
From a percentage standpoint, our exports grew faster and a larger percentage growth than our imports did. And we had an excellent year in imports. So there is some export business. We see it increasing.
At the Port of Seattle, exports increased 30% over the first quarter of last year. How much of those new exports are attributable directly to the trains is difficult to determine. But the railroads believe they're making an impact. Cotton that used to go out of other ports like New Orleans is now going through the Pacific Northwest. What's next? It's expected that there will be more double-stack trains going in and out of Tacoma and Seattle. A land bridge which may send European exports to Asia and Asian exports to Europe across the continental U.S. In Seattle, Glenn Farley, King 5 News.
And Glenn has an in-depth report on this new technology on Top Story at 6:30 tonight, a technology that appears to be changing the ports of Puget Sound.
This double-stacked Burlington Northern freight train is headed eastbound, loaded with imports for America. It is fast making Seattle a global hub. We'll tell you why next on Top Story.
Top Story with Mike James and Lori Matsukawa and reporters Linda Brill, Bob Simmons, Charlotte Rayner, and Greg Palmer.
Good evening, I'm Mike James.
And I'm Lori Matsukawa. Tonight on Top Story, a rail revolution is coming. It's a new way of taking ship containers, stacking them on rail cars, and hauling tons of goods to the east and beyond.
Tonight we'll talk about the impact of all this on Puget Sound Ports, the millions of dollars at stake, and how those double-stacked trains could make Seattle an international shipping hub.
First, let's go to Gene Anderson with today's major headlines. Gene.
That's the forecast. Now back to Mike and Lori and Top Story.
Not bad at all, Jeffrey. Thank you. Tonight on Top Story, a rail revolution on the make.
They are called double-stack freight trains, and they could make the Northwest what we're calling a global hub for shipping goods. We'll tell you how next.
Today, another Japanese shipping line announced it will sponsor its own container train to the Midwest, a double-stack train. Tomorrow, the first Korean line is expected to jump on the double-stack bandwagon.
So the question, what is double-stack? It has been called the biggest revolution in transportation since the container ship 20 years ago. And here with answers to all of our questions about double-stack and what it means, Glenn Farley, who's been working on this for quite some time. Glenn, good evening.
Mike, Lori. Seattle and Tacoma are gateways to the Pacific, and these two ports have become the Pacific's gateway to the American consumer. The desire to reach those consumers has led to a transportation revolution. Cargo used to be hauled piecemeal in and out of ships, transferred to boxcars, and slowly sent across the country. Well, somebody got the idea of putting all of that stuff in boxes called containers and piled them on ships. Now, 20 years after the container revolutionized the seas, it is now revolutionizing the land. This is the gateway to the gateway, the Seattle International Gateway, a specialized railroad yard some 300 yards away from the dock. In less than an hour, a truck can take a container from shipside through this checkpoint and drive directly to the star of this new revolution. The star, the double-stack railroad car, a land-going container ship. In a few hours, this rolling container clipper will be clocking 60 on its way to Chicago. It will arrive in the Midwest in 3 days, in New York in 6, half a week less than it did just a few months ago.
It's just become accepted that double stack movements are the best way to move freight from port to inland point. And it's all good things. So you say double stack and it's like mom and apple pie.
As the Burlington Northern's top salesman for double stack, for the railroad's international business, these words are what you might expect to hear from a man in Murray Watson's position. But in a few short years, the double stack has grown from basically nothing
to handling 50% of our international business.
In how much time?
In 2 years.
Have you ever seen anything grow that fast?
No.
Train number 12, which just left, isn't the only one to depart the gateway each night, loaded with goodies for import-hungry folks back east. There's talk around here, talk about lots of trains, like the number 12, like the 22 and the 4, all container, all fast, all carrying products bound for department stores and electronic showrooms, plus parts for American assembly plants which make Japanese cars and microwaves.
It's been almost revolutionary, and the revolution has just started.
For 40 years, Fred Tolan has been in the freight business. If you bought a pair of pants or pantyhose at Frederick and Nelson, or an orange from California or Florida, Fred Tolan probably arranged to get it here. Containers have always moved by rail as well as by truck and ship. But until the past few years, containers rode either on flat cars like these or on truck chassis, piggyback style. Now, for the first time, the container has its own car. And while that may sound like a piece of technical trivia, people like Tolan claim the efficiencies are significant.
There's a benefit of at least $300 a load between here and Chicago, and at least $400 to $500 a load between here and the East Coast to be in a container. That is a tremendous motivation to encourage the use of it.
Welcome to the desert of eastern Washington. Here at a horseshoe curve surrounding a small canyon, one can hear Seattle-bound train number 3 slowly grind its way around a tight turn. If the double-stack train is the wave of the future, today it shows up America's trade imbalance. On train number 3, most of the double-stack cars are running with a single level of containers, and most of these are empty. The bulk of the container traffic is tied to international trade. At Wenatchee, train number 3 changes crews. One crew will take another train back to Spokane, and engineer Jim Smith will take the 3 on into Seattle. Even though number 3 is largely empty, Smith must still keep the train on time and on a fast schedule.
Who's moving beyond number 3?
Number 3 is moving, thank you. As train number 3 begins rolling, brakeman Art Dodge hops on board. From here, it's a mountainous trip back to the gateway. But while the double-stack story is a chapter out of modern railroading, it took the steamship companies to get the idea rolling. American President Lines and Sealand bought their own trains and had railroads pull them to their destinations. Other shipping concerns are contracting for equipment from railroads like the Burlington Northern. The stack trains have become inland extensions of water routes. But the railroads quickly caught on, and now the BN claims to operate the nation's biggest pool of double-stack cars. So why is double stack catching on so quickly? Here's a technical answer from a man who should know.
The less equipment that you can use to haul the same amount of freight, it's going to be, you know, economically advantageous, because each one of these twin stacks has 5 platforms. Will haul the same as 5 conventional piggyback cars that are twice the length.
But double stack equipment is rapidly replacing many piggyback flat cars. Today it hauls 50% of Burlington Northern's import-export freight. In less than 2 years, the railroad expects stack cars to be hauling 80%. This is one of the 2 major manufacturers of double-stack railroad cars, the Gunderson Company of Portland, Oregon. Here from raw steel, the stack cars come together. Huge jigs have been prepared where sub-assemblies like sides and ends are slid into place. Here, entire sections of cars are swung around overhead and placed into their final positions. The sunlight isn't the only thing that cuts through the industrial gloom. For Gunderson, the stack car has meant rebirth, jobs. You see, in 1979, this company employed almost 2,000 people and produced almost 6,000 railroad cars that year. But by 1983, things were in the dumper. They only made 25 railroad cars and employed only 10% of the workforce they once did. Well, the double stack car has brought back profitability, returned hundreds of people to the workforce, and the future looks bright.
We'll stay at 5 a day. We've got about 80 days at 5 a day work right now.
But the pressure is on, and the Gunderson workers face stiff competition from a competing car builder in Chicago. There's a lot of shop talk about work levels, employment. Cliff Eccles is a foreman here. He was laid off for 4 months when things went bad during the recession. Welder Steve Peterson was laid off a year. The company came up with its prototype for a double-stack car in 1984, and that saved the plant.
It's kind of hand-to-mouth now. We get orders and we build them and wonder where the next one's coming from, but luckily the company's been keeping us working, keeping a core of employees going here. So, yeah, I feel pretty good about our future.
It works pretty hard, you know. I mean, work just as hard as we did before, or maybe even harder.
On this day, workers were putting the finishing touches on the first car for Conrail, a big eastern railroad. Conrail is the Burlington Northern's connection into New York. The Burlington Northern has leased most of its cars from Gunderson and is acquiring more and more. But most of those cars are busy carrying imports and exports.
If we can convert, or if the industry can convert a lot of that traffic that's on truck westbound, then we talk about domestic containerization. That market could conceivably be 10 times bigger than the market we're looking at now.
It is now early afternoon, and train number 3 is climbing higher and higher into the Cascades. Behind the locomotives, more than a mile of railroad cars. Contents, mostly empty containers making their way back to Japan and Korea for another load. It's the potential for filling up these westbound trains that is creating excitement and anxiety.
A very conservative estimate of available space is well over 3,000 40-foot containers a week.
Again, freight traffic consultant Fred Tolan.
There's incredible potential for the stack train.
But the competition is fierce to try and fill up the Seattle-bound trains. Burlington Northern's Murray Watson.
We've been pricing it on a basis of what does it take to make it move. Now, the prices have, on the westbound, have been coming down, and well, part of what we've seen, though, is that's the double-stack train that allows you to do that. Allows, you know, part of that efficiency is being passed on to the producer.
Already Already, American President Lines claims to be making money on its backhaul, making money on containers not bound for Japan, but bound for the West Coast, domestic shipments. As train number 3 approaches the top of the mountains, inside of the Cascade Tunnel, one thinks about the ultimate impact of double stack. Imagine, if you will, ships much larger than the one behind me, ships that are so large they won't fit through the Panama Canal. And picture those ships coming here to the ports of Puget Sound, disgorging thousands and thousands of containers, containers not bound for Chicago or New York City, but containers bound for Europe. Right now, the Burlington Northern and the Union Pacific take trains from Seattle and Tacoma via Chicago on into New York. The time is 6 days or less, much shorter than the time needed just a few months ago. Shorter, they say, even for ships going through the canal. Overland has now become a faster route to an East Coast port or even beyond to Europe.
They can lay a container from the Orient in here easily in 7 days. They can lay it in here to New York or the East Coast in another 5 days. The BN and Conrail have proved that. That's 12 days. Then they can deliver it in Europe in another 5 to 7 days. And that's less than a third of the time to bring it all water or to bring it across Siberia by land.
Back in the number 3, there is potential for filling up the empty slots, perhaps with containers bound for Japan from West Germany, France, or England. It could put the Northwest in position to become another Rotterdam, making Seattleites American-Dutch traders, making money by handling goods, the financing, and the business of getting the rest of the world what it wants.
It's got to mean more jobs. It's got to mean more tax revenues coming into the area. And, of course, then you have the multiplier going through the economy, and it's a growth industry.
By early evening, train number 3 has arrived in downtown Seattle. It will wend its way through the industrial areas around Spokane Street, finally into the Seattle International Gateway, a few hundred yards from the dock. Its double-stack cars will be reloaded with imports tomorrow and highball their way back across the country. A seemingly endless cycle, but one which has changed faster than anybody expected. And it is expected that these may be just the first generation of double-stack cars. New cars are already coming online, which will handle longer containers and heavier loads. But as the double-stack story grows, so it's predicted that the ports will, with demand for higher cranes for super ships and more land for docking space. With that comes tax demand and presumably economic expansion.
It's a powerful, Glenn, economic story. Let's take off on your last point there, the need for expansion and the new pressure on the ports. How does Seattle-Tacoma stand in the competition? There's going to be competition on the West Coast for this business. I assume California ports must be thinking double-stack train themselves.
California ports have already got double-stack trains, so the competition is there. Seattle ports claim to have the edge because it's a 1 day shorter shipping time between the West Coast and Asia. Also, they are claiming the containers are on the ground here almost immediately, going from ships maybe in 24, 48 hours at the most onto the trains, and they're gone. They're claiming that LA has seen delays 3, 4, 5 days sometimes in the ground.
So speed is our edge. What about the competition for trucking lines? I mean, this seems to be a potential danger for them.
Yeah, it is.
Are they concerned about
it? The railroads, lost a lot of that merchandise business coming, for nice products for those of us that live out here in Puget Sound years ago. And now they think this is the big chance to get back into that business. As you heard the vice president for Gunderson say, if you can get that domestic containerization, which is already happening by American President Lines, a shipping company which owns its own trains and also ships to Asia, it's making more money on its domestic shipments than it is across the water.
We only have a few seconds left, but I was struck by something that you very graphically showed, how few trains loaded come back. The boxcars simply aren't loaded with much. Is that a drag on the potential here, the fact that we're not shipping much out of the country?
Well, hopefully once the dollar situation turns around, the trade deficit turns around, a lot of that stuff will fill back up and make the economies even better and solve that problem.
We shall see. Glenn Farley, thank you very much. A very interesting story. We'll be right back.
This is Top Story.